Hello and welcome to a very special episode of EMSNation, where we are joined today by two incredibly bright, industrious, hopeful, positive young board members of an organization called the Code Green Campaign. And one of our guests today is Ann Marie Farina. She's the president of the Code Green Campaign. And in March of 2014, along with her secretary, Fiona Campbell, out of Austin, Travis County, Texas, started this project to bring awareness to something that we still, in the year of 2016, as EMS professionals and pre-hospital professionals, as well as medical directors, have difficulty speaking about, talking about, acknowledging. What we do on a daily, day-to-day basis and the things we see can sometimes be horrifying. Even though we're there in the line of duty to do our jobs, an opportunity to decompress, debrief, share and offload some of those stories, and generate really empathy amongst EMS providers who are undergoing the same experience all over the country and likely all over the world. The Code Green Campaign, a tremendous effort. They launched March of 2014 and have an aggressive storytelling campaign to say, hey, we're out there. And if you need help, contact us. Read our stories. Engage with our support groups. We want to get to you, reach you before a tragedy occurs. And that's something we're very humble about. And, I really have to applaud these two ladies as well as the board members for the Code Green Campaign for pushing this issue and bringing more awareness to it. This strikes home personally because recently within the EMS Wolfpack, within 1 degree of separation, we had in the last month 2 provider suicides. Those kinds of occurrences are not just coincidence. And really, it's about awareness and it's about being constructive and supportive and empathetic. Just hearing the experiences of other providers can be really, really helpful for those folks who are struggling. So this episode is dedicated to a very special member of the EMS Wolfpack. He's a ginger. You may know him as @NoDSAT, going out to you in tribute of a friend and fallen comrade. So hang on tight, guys. This is a really good, informative episode. Please do share with colleagues who you think may benefit from this. All right, guys. On the line, we have Ann Marie Farina, as well as the illustrious Fiona Campbell. Good afternoon, guys. Welcome to the EMSNation podcast. We are so excited to have you guys on the line. And this is a topic that is near and dear and very pertinent to our hearts. And we're excited to dig in and really get to know you guys better, as well as the Code Green Campaign a little bit better.
Awesome. We're really glad to be here.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. So we talk about codes, and I think the designation of a code STEMI, for example, an ST elevation MI, or a code stroke, or a code trauma, designates or denotes rather to the providers, healthcare providers, that a critically ill patient is coming in. And you guys have sort of used that as an inspiration to name your group the Code Green Campaign. Can you talk to us a little bit about the history of the project, how it got started, and where the name comes from?
So Code Green started almost exactly 2 years ago after one of my coworkers died of suicide. I started talking with some friends of mine from different agencies around the country, and we realized that we all knew somebody that had died of suicide, even though we're all in totally different parts of the country working for different types of agencies. Like this can't be a coincidence. We didn't all know someone that had been in an ambulance wreck, but we all knew somebody who had died of suicide. Hang on a second. So we started looking into the statistics and realized that the statistics that were out there were rather scary about the rates of PTSD and suicide and stuff. But it wasn't getting a lot of attention. The internet, everybody knows everybody now. A group of us started talking about, what can we do about this? And we decided to start a storytelling project, because if there's one thing that first responders like to do, it's tell stories. Maybe if people can get together and tell their stories anonymously, where they aren't faced with this massive stigma in our industry, maybe we can get people talking and shed some light on this situation. We spent about a week on the name, and it was a very brutal week with a number of people trying to come up with something. We wanted something that was related to EMS, or connect to EMS, but wasn't necessarily too overt or too complicated. We were trying to come up with acronyms and all sorts of things. And then finally, somebody mentioned that green is the color for mental health awareness, just like pink is breast cancer awareness. My coworker's last name was also Green, and so that coincidence was kind of too much to ignore. In a lot of hospitals, they use like code silver, code gray for different things, and it just clicked from there. And that's how we got our name.
So Ann Marie, you're the current president of the Code Green campaign, and it sounds like the inspiration happened almost 2 years ago from a tragic event. And then you guys harnessed the power of storytelling to just start building a network.
Yeah, pretty much. We started this storytelling project. My coworker died on March 12th. We came up with the idea on the 16th, and I think it was by the 22nd or 23rd, we already had a Facebook page and we're up and running. And it absolutely just blew up from there. And we realized that we had started something that was going to be a lot bigger than a storytelling project.
Absolutely meaningful and impactful. And where were you based in the USA in March of 2014?
I was still in Spokane. I've been here for several years.
Absolutely. The Pacific Northwest?
They consider us the inland Northwest because we're on the east side of the mountains. So we're the dry, not quite as pretty part of the state.
Thank you for the clarification. Okay. Fiona, how do you get involved with the Code Green campaign? You're from Texas and currently based in Austin, Travis County. Is that correct?
That's correct. I helped get a lot of the original campaign up and started, but a lot of my momentum came into play in June of 2014 when one of my coworkers suicided. That was when I decided that we really needed to not just have resources and stories, but we also needed to branch out into education. I work very closely with my department's Explorer group, teenagers who are interested in public safety, specifically EMS, for us as a career. And I developed a small piece of education just to kind of get them capable of talking about things that are going on in their world and to make sure that they know that there are additional resources out there for them. And we then turned around and developed that into CSBM's accredited education that we piloted with Austin Travis County in January of 2015.
In regards to the Code Green campaign itself, did you two meet over Facebook?
Yes, we met through mutual friends through Facebook.
Understood. So here it is, the power of social media and the ability to really loop in providers, gain momentum, and bring light to an issue that was very underserved in amongst our providers. How did you guys start with storytelling? Can you dig into that a little bit and tell us really where the inspiration of telling stories as a means of raising awareness came from? Because clearly there was not enough weight or focus on this issue. How does storytelling as a means of communication emote that or change that a little bit for folks?
Storytelling is kind of an interesting thing when you really look at the history of storytelling, and something that we as humans seemed really ingrained to want to do. We want to talk, we want to tell our stories, and it's a very powerful way for people to explain what has happened with them. And so allowing people to do that anonymously, I mean, we are not the first mental health storytelling project out there. I think are just the first US-based one for first responders. And it's kind of well established that people will talk. They will tell their stories if you give them an avenue and if you take away the barriers that are preventing them from talking, some of the stigma stuff. And so that's what we were hoping to do with setting it up anonymously. We know that there's this massive stigma. We know that people aren't going to want to talk to each other. They don't want to talk to their coworkers. That people are afraid of being fired. They're afraid of being ostracized or being seen as weak. We're the lifesavers. We're the tough ones. Okay, if we can get this set up anonymously, our theory was that people would start talking, and people did. In 2 years, we've gathered about 400 stories from first responders. Most of them have been anonymous, but some have not been. And people have told us, they're like, I don't know why I'm writing this, but I just feel like I need to get this out. I feel like I just need to write this down and to get it out there, and I'll feel better. And they do afterwards.
How exactly do you guys solicit and collate these stories, and what exactly is the means that you bring them to light?
So we have a website, which is www.codegreencampaign.org. And on our website, there is a submit a story section. And there's a form that people can fill out. It's really simple. The only required section is the story box. People are allowed to put in their name and location, that thing, but it's optional. And that sends it straight into a Google Drive document. We get no information that isn't put into the form. We don't get IP address. We don't get location. We get nothing. All the edits to the Google Doc look like I made them because it's in my account. And so it puts them into this spreadsheet. And then we can go into the spreadsheet and we pull the stories out. Back in our early days, we were mostly gathering stories from people we knew personally. We randomized the stories, and we don't publish them in the order we get them in order to help kind of obscure who submitted them. Because sometimes people talk about specific incidents, and we know that if we were to publish that story the week after that incident happened, it'd be more likely people would connect the dots. So we randomize the stories, and then we publish them every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on our website, and then also on all of our social media. And it gets out there that way. And we also have an arrangement with EMS1 that we select one story a month that EMS1 promotes on their website and republishes for their people.
All right, so here we are building the network. March 2014, kicking things off, getting started. April, the Facebook page is up and running. You're starting to solicit stories. And can you describe a little bit early on, were they trickling in? Did stories flood in? How were folks reaching out to you? And what was sort of the mood and atmosphere at that time? Because you had briefly mentioned the stigma associated with mental health, especially in EMS, and any sort of first responder culture, whether it be fire, police, first responder, EMS, and definitely looking forward to dig into that a little bit more. But sort of as things started progressing and you're all working to raise awareness with real human experience, how did things progress after that?
Slowly and then very, very suddenly.
And then a flood.
It was. The best way to describe it is we started our Facebook page, and we, of course, invited all of our friends to like it. And we're like, hey, we're doing this thing, check it out. All the people that, we badgered helping us come up with a name. And so for the first, couple of days we existed, we had, a couple fans trickling in. I think we got up to a couple hundred. And then one night, I was working nights at the time. So one morning, I get home from work, I go to sleep, and then I wake up in the afternoon, and suddenly the page has went from 200 to 2,000 likes in 8 hours. And I don't remember what happened. I don't remember who shared it or who promoted it or mentioned it. And within 3 days, we had 5,000 fans. And that was the point I think we all looked at each other and went, oh boy, what did we just do?
Fiona, do you remember that time as well?
It was insane. It's only grown exponentially from there. The stigma, to answer that question, is getting better. More people are referencing us or tagging us in posts on different fan pages to tap us into conversations, as it were, or to say, hey, you don't have to be crusty or to have that kind of an attitude there. The time is over to think that you have to suck it up and deal with things, but it's a very, very slow process to change the overall culture in public safety, regardless of which aspect we're addressing. And it's not necessarily going to happen in our generation, but we're starting to see that shift.
So culture change, especially in public safety, and that's your background as well, Fiona, if I'm not mistaken, is public safety, correct?
Correct.
Changing culture, and what is your experience in regards to the etiology of the stigma in mental health? And I know overall as a culture, we do have, even being 2016, we're heading in the right direction of being able to talk about some of these issues. But until very recently, we weren't even able to communicate or to say that, you know what, I had this experience and these are the ramifications. What is it about first responder culture that makes that process so difficult?
The machismo, the idea that we are the fixers, we have to come in, solve problems, and we have to be somewhat other, somewhat superhuman, as it were. We shouldn't be affected by the things that we do or see. We shouldn't take it home at the end of the day. That tends to be the biggest thing that we run into culturally. Ann, do you have anything to add?
No, the machismo is the biggest thing. It's we are the fixers. We are there to fix things. We're not the ones that need to be fixed. And nobody wants to have an appearance that they can't handle the job or that they can't handle a call. On the scene, when everything's going to crap, people look at us to be the ones that know what's going on. And we really don't like being put in situations where we aren't that person. And anything to do with mental health is one of those situations. You know, you're navigating a system you're not as familiar with. You're admitting to having problems you don't want to have to admit to. And with so much stigma and so few people talking, is a lot of people don't realize they think I'm the only one dealing with this. I'm the only one that's being affected, and they kind of isolate themselves out. First responders are a very cohesive group. You know, if you're a firefighter, then everybody in your wedding party was probably also a firefighter or married to a firefighter, and it was probably officiated by your fire chief. And people are terrified of losing that. They don't want to be ostracized from that group, because we really ingrain being a first responder into our identity, especially those of us that started young. It's just, you have to keep up appearances.
So there's so many valuable nuggets within that. Let's definitely dig in and explore that a little bit. So what I'm hearing from you guys and your experience is the overall patriarchal culture of first responders. Also this superhero syndrome, I don't know if you want to call it, but this sensation that when our community members are at their absolute worst, they have an emergency, they have a crisis, we're the ones that are dispatched to the scene in the moment. We take control. We are able to make the interventions, life-saving or otherwise, to help that family, to help those community members in that difficult time. And when it comes to abstracting our real-life experience, there's a little bit of a stopgap in the sense that we're responding to these things, but we're not allowed to process them as human beings and individuals, based on the nature of the culture and things along those lines. Does that sound about right?
Yes.
Yeah, it does.
Okay, so now we have this superhero syndrome. We're not allowed to experience emotions. And then the second thing you guys really dug into was this identity. So we really do stick together as first responders, and the identity in the sense that, hey, I may be experiencing this, but nobody else is talking about it. Probably I'm the exception rather than the norm, so let me bottle that up inside and try not to think about it.
That is exactly what happened.
Yep. That's absolutely the way it goes.
And so here you guys are, Code Green campaign, and saying, you know what, a lot of us are feeling these emotions. Our intrinsic response to say, I'm unique here is not true. Let's actually collect the data, look at first responder wellness, flip this concept on its head. Here we are now, probably 2015, and saying, mental health is a real thing. Let's address it, or let's dissociate rather the stigma associated with it.
Yep.
Yeah.
So do you guys have statistics then you started collecting on the overall scope of the problem, specifically within EMS, correct?
Yes. And that is a Fiona thing. She's the keeper of our statistics.
Yes.
Fiona.
We're planning on putting that on her next batch of business cards.
So Fiona, can we dig in? What did your research sort of expose?
So first off, it's very difficult to separate fire and EMS, partly because fire services require their personnel, for the most part, to be certified as EMS providers. So most of what I'm going to address are combination fire and EMS numbers. It's very, very difficult to separate the two. So that's what I'm talking about. PTSD rates are typically in the 20 to 35% range, depending on which particular studies you're looking at. So 1/3 to 1 in 5 of our providers have fully diagnosable under the DSM-5 PTSD, which is not surprising when you consider what we experience. We repeatedly go into traumatic situations. We are away from our families. We miss birthdays, holidays. We work extremely long hours. Our work weeks are very, very lengthy, and we frequently work multiple jobs in order to make ends meet. Many of our providers have money issues. They have relationship issues because, it all ties in together. So very, very high risk for PTSD. When you look back at the DSM-4 and you look at criteria for partial PTSD, over half of our providers meet criteria for one or the other.
And Fiona, just for our listeners, I think most folks know what DSM is, but would you mind just defining that for us?
That's the diagnostic manual that psychiatrists and psychologists actually use. It's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. It's what the American Psychiatric Association puts out on a semi-regular basis for actually putting together those psychiatric codes that insurance likes to use for reconciling billing and diagnostics.
Sure. Thank you. And in terms of those statistics, is that in North America specifically?
Yes. Here in North America.
Gotcha. So 25 to 30% of all providers meet diagnostic criteria based on DSM-5 for PTSD. So that's staggering.
Yeah.
Staggering.
Absolutely. It's an astounding number.
And I think that also correlates with your experience in social media in the sense that you go from crickets chirping to the floodgates opening.
Yes.
Yeah. And the other statistics that have been developed have kind of been equally as scary. Last year, a group that is now called Reviving Responders did a survey, and they found that first responders reported having suicidal ideation at about 33% versus 3% of the general population. That kind of holds that the issue for us is several magnitudes larger than it is for civilians.
That's really staggering. That's incredible. And then in regards to overall suicide statistics?
Very disconcerting. We have had 26 as of today, March 5th. We have had 26 suicides of fire or EMS personnel here in the United States only. That is about one every 2.5 days. Last year, there were 114 confirmed, and obviously that number will change if we receive any backdated reports. But we've held fairly steady at about one provider every 3 days. When you add in law enforcement numbers, because they have a suicide rate of about 120 to 130, it fluctuates from year to year. We're doubling our numbers. Basically, we have one person in public safety suiciding every day.
And the really terrifying thing about that, too, is so we help a group called the Firefighter Behavioral Health Alliance track the suicide statistics. There's no government agency that does it, and so the FFBHA has kind of taken on that role for the last several years, and we end up feeding the info for them, and they keep the official database. But they had somebody come in, I think last year or the year before, and analyze their numbers, and they estimated that they were only getting probably about 1/3 of the true total. Because there's some states, like just to pick a completely random state like Alaska, that we might not get any reports from. And we know factually that there's absolutely no way there wasn't a single public safety related suicide in Alaska. We just didn't hear about it. So the true total may be significantly higher, and we're just not getting the numbers because it's all self-reported. We came into the picture in March of 2014. 2012 and 2013, the FFBHA had about 60 suicides reported each year. And since we came in, they've had over 100. Just us existing has almost doubled how well we're getting the reporting.
I absolutely believe that you raising awareness on the issue is going to lead to increased reporting, but I would still hazard a guess that they're being greatly underreported.
We agree. There's no way the numbers are anywhere close to what they actually are, and what they are is scary as it is.
I know we had the pleasure of meeting at EMS World Expo this past September, and we had planned on recording the podcast. Sort of the urgency from my perspective is, as you guys know, we started a group called the EMS Wolfpack, which is a band of brothers and sisters focused on wellness, health, safety, and things along those lines. And within the past 2 weeks, we had 1 degree of separation, but 2 MOS suicides just within the past 2 weeks. And it really, really hit us hard. And we're so thankful that you guys exist and you're raising awareness on these issues. So thank you. Thank you for that, guys.
We really try to be inclusive of kind of all the emergency response, emergency medicine groups, but we haven't had as much luck making inways into some of them, and we're hoping as we get bigger that we'll be able to raise more awareness with some of like the flight providers and in-hospital providers too.
Absolutely, and EMSNation wants to do its part to help bring awareness to provider mental health and really say you have a voice, you have an opinion, it's okay to express your emotions and to seek help.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's one of the biggest things is people ask us, they're like, how can we get involved? We really love what we're doing. And it's like, just talk. Let people know that it's okay to talk, that there is help out there are resources, and just do what you can to not contribute to the stigma. You know, some of the bad jokes that we make about certain types of patients we get and other judgmental things we tend to say, you know, don't say those. Make it clear that you are somebody that people can talk to if they're having a problem and that you know how to get them help. It seems like a small thing, but the more people that do that, the bigger impact it will have on reducing the stigma.
Have you guys interacted directly with providers that have reached out to you in crisis?
Yes, we have.
Are you able to sort of describe that a little bit? Because I can certainly imagine starting the group, your intentions were to raise awareness, and you may not have been ready to interface with folks on that level yet. Can you detail some of that for us? How do you handle that? How do you approach somebody who is reaching out to you, asking for help, and in crisis?
There's a couple of different ways that we go about it. I've got formal CISM and peer support training.
Tell us what CISM stands for.
It's Critical Incident Stress Management through International Critical Incident Stress Foundation. I have training both in that and in more general peer support in terms of guiding providers in terms of being able to talk out a bad call or just how things are going at home, and then redirecting them to our resources list for maybe more local resources that might be more appropriate. If I'm not readily available because I'm the one who's primarily actually peer support trained, then we do more referral to our resources page and to our crisis hotlines. But we have absolutely done a good chunk, maybe what would you say, Ann Marie, about 100 or so providers that we've directly done peer support to?
I would say probably at least. I'm not even sure at this point because there's been so many over the years. And some of it, I say years, like it's been so long. It's been 2.
Over the past 2 years?
Yes. Sometimes it feels longer, but other times I can't believe we've come this far in this short amount of time. But it's been a lot. There's been a lot of people that have reached out because we get a spectrum. We get people that are just like, hey, I'm having a bad time. I think I'd like to talk to somebody. Can you help me find somebody? And those are generally fairly short conversations where it's like, yeah, you know, what happened? What's going on? Where do you live? We'll look in our database and see if we have anybody, all the way up to some very, very intense conversations where it's like, you need to go to the hospital now. And if you don't agree to go, then I'm going to call somebody to make you go because that's the point of crisis that they're at. And luckily, we've had very few of those situations that have reached that point. But we do get a whole big spectrum of people that are seeking help. And luckily, our database of provider resources is growing. So as that gets bigger, we'll be able to refer more people directly to somebody in their area.
Do you also want to address the RCW law that we fall under?
Yeah. So this is a very important point that is related to this. I wish I could actually quote the exact RCW, but we talked about earlier that Code Green was established in Washington State. We are a Washington State business, as all nonprofits are required to be. And Washington State has this very, very awesome law that covers any service that does mental health referrals for first responders, and it lists firemen, EMS, police, etc. Our records legally don't exist. They are untouchable. They cannot be subpoenaed. They cannot, as far as the state is concerned, we don't keep records. They are completely inaccessible to anybody who wants to try and get their hands on them. And this law was advocated for by Safe Call Now, which is a first responder oriented group that runs a mental health helpline here in Washington. And they advocated for this a few years ago because their primary audience were police officers who, they know how easy it is to get a warrant for things or a subpoena for things. And so they were very paranoid about calling for help because they didn't want it to come up later when they tried to get a new job or on some sort of review or what have you. So they were able to get this law passed. And part of this law also is that we can contact an authority if we feel that it's necessary, but we're not mandated to either. So if you call us and say, or if you email us, because everything is routed, through Washington, so it applies everywhere.
Even if you get a hold of me in Texas,
yep,
you're routed via Washington. So me providing assistance to you applies to this.
Yeah. And it means that when people contact us, they don't have to worry about those records somehow becoming public later or being able to be subpoenaed or us calling, the police on them. I know that's kind of a common concern is, if I call the suicide helpline and tell them that I'm feeling suicidal, they're just going to immediately call the cops. And that's something that we reserve for situations where we feel there's, if somebody were to call us and say, I have the gun in my hands, that kind of thing. But we've never had to go that far. We've always been able to intervene enough to get somebody help before it got to that point.
So the privacy is a huge issue. Thanks so much for sharing that. And then also the non-punitive aspect to your work in the sense that people will not be retaliated against or discriminated against by their home agency for expressing concern or for voicing their opinion or for seeking help.
Right. Obviously, it's not anything that we share. We have zero obligation to do that, and we frankly don't want to. But that's a big thing that a lot of people are concerned about. If they say that they're seeking assistance for a mental health concern or for substance abuse or for anything else, that they could lose their certification or their employment completely. That's a big concern that we run into with a lot of providers.
So you guys started talking about the database and building a national framework for resources. Can we start to dig into a little bit? All right, folks have made contact. They're aware of an issue. They realize that they need help. Where do they go from there?
We have our database of first responder friendly mental health resources, which is a big mouthful to say. So the database, it's all things that have been reported to us. So there's a number of helplines of either first responder specific helplines or kind of general helplines that we recommend. There are a list of inpatient treatment centers for either substance abuse, mental health concerns, or people who are what's called dual diagnosis, which means they have both, which is frankly fairly common in this field, if not the vast majority of people. We also have a state-by-state list. If you are in California, you can go to the list, scroll down to California, click California, and you get Northern and Southern California because it's a big state. And then under each section, there are the mental health providers firefighters that we've been made aware of. A lot of them used to be first responders, or they have family members that are first responders, or they've just kind of specialized in them. But all of them have either experienced treating first responders or a history of, so they understand the job. And then if somebody comes to us and they don't have, there isn't a listing in our database for their area, then we really recommend that they find somebody that advertises that they are trained in trauma counseling. Everybody kind of specializes. So it's like, if you're looking for a counselor, you don't want somebody who deals almost primarily with adolescent eating disorders, because that's not really going to work. But if you get somebody who's worked with veterans and is trained in multiple ways of trauma counseling, they are probably going to be the next best option after somebody who used to be a paramedic, because they understand trauma and they're used to dealing with adults who have suffered through either acute trauma or chronic trauma, which we get both. A big concern a lot of people have is that, I don't want the counselor or the therapist to be scared off by what I tell them. It's like, if they're treating veterans, then they've heard they can deal with hearing some awful stuff.
And we'll link to all your resources in the show notes, but just to detail briefly, those resources can be found on codegreencampaign.org under Health and Resources.
Yes.
All right, fantastic. We'll definitely include that in our show notes. Ladies, I want to thank you for your time. This has been invaluable. And I also wanted to touch upon a recent award that you guys received, the Nicholas Rosecrans Award, honoring leadership in injury prevention by EMS personnel. So first, congratulations. And then secondly, can you tell us a little bit about this? Injury prevention, this is not their typical recipient of this award. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
We were not expecting it, so it was kind of a shock. And then after we found out that we'd received the award, we looked back at who the past winners were. We had a little bit of a mutual meltdown when we realized who some of the past award winners were, and the caliber of groups that we were being equated to was really shocking, kind of eye-opening for how other people see us. You're right, we're not really the typical recipient of this award. It's a lot of the past award winners are programs dealing with preventing children from having car seat issues or drowning incidents. We had the honor of having dinner with the mother of Nicholas Rosecrans, Lynn. She comes to the award ceremony and actually presents the award every year. And in speaking with her and speaking with Paul, the gentleman from Epic Medics who put the award together, they really felt that in this case, we still focus on prevention. That is our goal. Our goal is preventing suicides and preventing responders from leaving the field due to stress or developing PTSD or what have you. One of the things is that we can't prevent issues in other people if we don't first prevent issues in ourselves. So they really felt that the award was applicable, even though we're not exactly injury prevention.
Fair enough. You guys are preventing injury in the technical, if we analyze it technically. So absolutely. Congratulations. I know that's a huge accomplishment. I also want to ask you guys, so now that you all are collating these stories, a weave of voices, if you will, bringing light to mental health and issues that we face on a daily basis as first responders, letting folks know that they're not alone, and then bridging them with resources within their local municipalities to get the help that they need. What does the future hold for you guys? You're really just getting started, and the future is bright for our community of first responders. What are you guys planning?
We have a lot of stuff in the works. So I will preface this with the fact that we are currently all volunteer run. We don't have any paid staff. So stuff happens slowly. We really hope to be able to have paid staff so that we're a little more, I don't want to say organized, but so that we're not just working around our work schedules. We plan on being in attendance in several more conferences this year, either as exhibitors or as speakers. We've been accepted to speak at a few places. We are planning on pushing the education aspect more. We're going to get the education up on our website so that providers can kind of sign up for that individually, and then also hope to be teaching more at agencies. We also have plans to implement first responder-oriented peer support groups, because a lot of people aren't willing to use resources provided by their employer. They're just not. And the one thing that we've repeatedly found is that people want to talk to other first responders. They really just want to talk. The peer support groups, we will be seen by kind of a supervising psychologist or psychiatrist who oversees everything and advises. And then groups will be run by a group leader who will be a volunteer for Code Green that has been thoroughly vetted and will generally have had some sort of training, either peer support or the CASD training, something like that. And then the groups will be open to, we'll be working with the group leaders to determine who the groups will be open to. So a group leader could have a group that is, say, just for police officers in Williamson County. Or they could have a group that is for all first responders in Williamson County, and kind of allow them to set up the group in a way that works for the audience. And then groups will also have the option of being able to have friends and family be included, or even set up a group just for friends and family, because they are also affected by what we experience. You know, we do take our jobs home with us. So that's kind of our big project that we're hoping to get launched here soon. We were hoping to get it launched by the end of last year, but then we had to get all the legal stuff sorted out, and that always takes longer than you ever think it's going to. And so that's a big thing. And then really just growing the resources that we have, growing the resource database. We hope eventually to be able to sponsor counseling for people who can't afford it. You get a lot of, volunteer responders who, they don't have insurance through their employer, or their employer doesn't have an EAP. Or I say employer, but, because they're a volunteer. And in some of those cases, too, they have to travel significant distance to get to a counselor or therapist, and it can be really hard for them to get all that sorted out. And so we hope once we have the budget that we can sponsor people who don't have insurance and aren't otherwise able to afford getting help. The TEMA Contour up in Canada, a very similar group to us, has been doing that and has been very successful, and has been able to help a number of people who otherwise had barriers to care, financial barriers. So that's kind of a big goal that's probably going to be a few years before we have that kind of budget.
Well, those certainly sound like amazing projects, and something that's very needed in the first responder community. Where can folks find you on the interwebs? I know you guys have various social media outlets, but would you mind just sharing some of that with EMSNation so we can find you guys?
We have our website, our main website, and then we have Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, and Instagram, none of which we're very good at except for the Facebook.
Okay, so codegreencampaign.org is the website for all the various social medias. If we search for Code Green Campaign, we should be able to find you guys.
Yes, I think the only exception is our Twitter is Code Green EMS.
All right, we'll also link to that in our show notes.
Yeah, just because of character limitations, we had to go with Code Green EMS as opposed to anything else.
Yeah, I think it cut off the last 3 letters of our name when I tried to sign up.
Oh boy. Amazing. And just to wrap up, do you guys have any asks of our audience or any requests of our audience? And I know we had briefly mentioned sharing stories. Just if you could re-emphasize that, and if there's anything else that you'd like to ask the EMSNation audience.
Definitely submit your stories. Do so via our website. If you have any additional resources that aren't listed in our database, we would love for you to send them our way. The more we get, the better it is for all of our providers.
Yeah, absolutely. All those resources that we've collected have mostly been because people contacted us and say, hey, I am in Omaha, Nebraska, and I have this absolutely awesome psychologist who spent 10 years as a paramedic before they went back to school. And I told them about your website, and they said that it's okay for you guys to list them as taking new patients. And that's how we got most of our resources. So that's a huge thing, is we really act as a clearinghouse for a lot of this. Biggest way that people can help us is by sending us in this information. Send us your stories, send us, information for providers that treat first responders, and then just talk. Let people know we exist. Let people know there's help out there. Do what you can to reduce the stigma.
Amazing. Ann Marie, Fiona, thank you so much for your time. I know this will be incredibly valuable. We look forward to getting this out to the community. Keep doing what you're doing. All the best, ladies.
Oh, thank you very much for having us.
Of course. Cheers.
Guys, thank you so much for listening. I hope you found that informative. Ann Marie and Fiona are fantastic. Please do check out their website, codegreencampaign.org. Find them on Facebook. There's a tremendous community out there. If you like this kind of content, please send us a tweet, #EMSNation. Let us know if you'd like more regarding wellness, general health, circadian rhythm, shift cycle disorders, things along those lines. We're happy to find those experts and bring that information to you. To leave off, I will just quote one of our great presidents, Franklin D. Roosevelt: "When you come to the end of your rope, tie a knot and hang on." EMS folks out there, hang on, reach out for help. There are a lot of avenues and options open to you. Let's build each other up and acknowledge each other and be empathetic. And of course, take pre-hospital care to the next level. This is Faizan Arshad wishing everyone a safe tour.